Welcome everyone. We're really excited to share some resources with you and some people who have used them and helped us actually develop the final resource that we're going to share with you. If you have been on the GLOBE website, we did announce that we have this resource for holding local student research symposia. Um, Along the way, just to give you a little bit of background, in 2016, we started to have regional student research symposia, and there were 6 of them across the country. That's the United States. And then there were also some people that were holding different versions of a symposia or a student conference, sharing their student research around the GLOBE program protocols. And then COVID came. And we had a version that was kind of a virtual one. And then somewhere in there, they started having local ones. And these were great because students didn't have to travel. Our regional ones were for 5th to 12th grade. And these local ones could go lower in grade level because the littles didn't have to travel across state lines or take planes for the first time and things like that. And so there was support for those through YLACIS, which had grant funding for those. We also supported some of those along the way. We developed resources that could be used both regionally and locally. And just so you know, kind of the idea behind our regional ones are that what we're really trying to promote is a growth mindset, meaning these whole series of events, local, regional, virtual, are all about students coming in with their projects, talking with STEM professionals, talking with each other, just like they were at a scientific conference. And we're professional scientists, and really getting feedback from STEM professionals so that they could support the growth of their research and take it to the next level. So that's kind of the framework of these. So these always included those conversations with a STEM professional, and then students talking to each other, so peer review. And then we also hopefully were able to provide some sort of hands-on experience for the students, whether it was a regional, local, or virtual was kind of hard. But some sort of experience where they got to learn some additional science. So that's kind of the framework of the Student Research Symposia. That's what makes it a little bit different from a science fair, where students aren't judged and given a grade, but it's more a conversation and they're getting that feedback. So what we have for you tonight is we have people that have hosted local student research symposia. And then Haley's also going to share the resource that we developed so that you could hold your own. And from there, and if you've also held one of these yourself and you want to add in at some point, then we'll open the floor for that feedback as well. So with that, I am turning it over to Jodi.
All right. Well, thank you, Jen, and thanks everyone for being here. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk about what we've been doing in Northwest Ohio over the last several years, and then I know Janene is going to speak as well about what she's been doing. So hopefully you'll see some themes here. We probably do things slightly differently, but Jen laid out the plan, like what started with an SRS. And we try to hold true to that as much as possible with our own maybe little spin on it. So we started, now I know we have a team. I first want to acknowledge that. Excite Learning, our partnership for GLOBE, also works with Bowling Green State University, where I retired from, and the NWO STEM Center, and the Toledo Zoo. So that's our kind of partnership. We also collaborate with the University of Toledo Globe Mission Earth, and that's been really special for us because we've been able to bring our two groups together for the symposium. and we really love that. And then we have funding from the U.S. GLOBE office when we did the Midwest Regional. We've had National Geographic funding, YLACES funding, and Ohio Science STEM Learning Network funding, as well as funding that came out of our partnership groups. So I want to acknowledge the team, knowing that this has been a team effort. So we started in 2022. I know Toledo was having their symposia before that with Globe Mission Earth. But for me personally, we wrote a National Geographic Project Prairie Pandemic, a way to keep kids collecting data and doing Globe and doing science even during the pandemic. So really at that point in time, I was just working with 2 teachers in 2 schools. We had backpacks. We sent them home with equipment. Kids collected some data at home. And they came back in the spring when we were back in session. We held our first symposium outdoors, masks on. So a sign of the times, right? We had 45 students in 2 schools, and we were off and running. The next year, we just expanded that to 4 schools and 83 students. And so we just decided to make this an annual thing at the zoo. And then the year after that, we held the Midwest Regional. So the official Midwest Regional Symposium for Globe. So half of our numbers, roughly half, came from that group, or actually about a fourth came from that group. And then we also, the second day, we brought in our local kids. So we really exploded that year to 394 students. And that's the year Toledo joined us and collaborated with us. 21 schools, and like I said, 2 days. 2025, last year, we had 537 students, 20 schools, 2 days. And this year we have over 705 students pre-registered, 23 schools, and we're making it a 3-day event. We'll do the littles on day 1, the middle grades on day 2, and high school on day 3. So you can see our numbers have really grown, and this is good to see. In these days, sometimes teachers are busy and feel overburdened. So to see that this kind of interest with this exponential growth is really exciting for us. Most importantly, I think, is this planning and post, the planning event and planning for the event, and then the follow-up after the event. So, we started out figuring out where we wanted to host this thing, and the Toledo Zoo was so gracious that they offered space to us. It's phenomenal space. Everyone loves going to the zoo, so I'm sure that's an incentive for both teachers and students. The timing we had to think through, and so we just decided, May after testing is just a really good time and place for it. Gives teachers all year long to work on a project, and then they can really kind of focus on the final touches, after testing and getting the students ready to present. I already talked about funding, but that's critical for what we were doing. We had to have funding to be able to pull those kind of numbers off. For as far as recruitment goes, we started with a flyer, and those are active links. If you want to, I know this will be shared with you later. You can check out our flyers. That was the very first one. It was really raw, but like I said, it was 2 schools and 2 teachers, so it worked. But some way to tell teachers what we were doing, what we were up to, and hopefully getting them interested in that. We have a registration form, and you can click there too. It's a Google form, and teachers just fill that out to let us know that they're interested, and then that's how we get our pre-registration numbers and can plan around that. We also have a program, and this one is from 2024. And again, this is part of, I think, the organization that's needed. We sent these to the teachers ahead of time so they knew exactly what was happening when they would get there, what to do, what the timing was, and so forth. And you can see that we color-coded everything. So within our agenda, we have, and I'll talk about the agenda later, but we have 3 little groups that would be presenting, 3 different time sessions, a session A, a poster session B, and a poster session C. Those are color-coded. And we ended up taking the program, all the kids' names, and color coding those. So they knew you are in the red group. So you are first going to be a presenter. If you're in the blue group, you're first going to be a peer reviewer. If you're in the green group, you're first going to go out and have a little time to explore the zoo. So, and then we put those on their name badges as well, so that everybody knew where they were supposed to go, and we could help quickly just by looking at the color of the name badge. Oh, blue, you're over here. Red, you're outside, or whatnot. So that really helped us a lot, is just to stay organized. And you can see not only did we put the group A, B, and C color-coded, their project number and their table number. So when schools got there, they could go right to the table that we assigned to them, get their poster put up, and go from there. The external reviewers could use the project numbers as they were rating and giving feedback to the students so they didn't have to type out the whole name of the project or the student names. They could just go project number. So that organization, I think, was critical to our success with the big numbers. Okay, hopefully I'm back to my slide presentation. Yes? Okay. Um, and then post, we wanted to make sure that we were able to give teachers feedback right away. So again, I'll show you our digital peer review form, expert review form. We were able to digitize that and send it to the teachers right away so that they had the comments from the reviewers. And we thought that was really important based on that growth mindset that Jen talked about. And we told students that every student is going to get some critical feedback. If we neglected to give you critical feedback, you came away with nothing that can help you improve. So we said, no matter if yours was a phenomenal presentation, you're still going to get critical feedback, growth feedback, because that's the only way, that's the gift of giving, that you know what to do next time. So we kind of really said that many times during the academic year when we were working with the schools and at this event. Then, of course, we sent out our thank yous to the expert reviewers. We also gave them evaluation summaries so they could get a feel for, how this whole day went beyond what they were looking at. And then with the teachers, we sent them some other comments that we had, sticker sheets that we had and so forth that you're going to see here. So it was just a lot of making sure we followed up with them so that they felt like it was worth their time in coming and hopefully wanting to come back the next year. So we set up a run of show program deck. And again, that helped us really stay organized. So that was the first slide. But when teachers came in, we had this up on the displays all over the facility so that the teachers would know what to do when they got there, right? They could go through this checklist and get organized because, again, with big numbers, we wanted to make sure things ran smoothly. So that was their checklist when they came in. We gave some introductions and we did an icebreaker. And I think icebreakers are important. I think it's worth mentioning, we all do icebreakers, but look at the smiles on the faces. And expert reviewers are side by side, rubbing shoulders, smiling and laughing with the kids. And I think that's important because, again, it's about that discussion. We're scientists discussing our work, not a judge and a student being evaluated by the judge, right? So we really wanted to make it seem like it was a collaboration and friendships that we were building along the way. At the beginning, of course, we had our career talk. Short and sweet is really important. So I think these are about 10 to 15-minute talks. This was a paleontologist at our university, and she was talking about how paleontology and climate research are now linked together. And I thought that was really cool. We gave a shout out to all of our expert reviewers, and we reminded them again, we wanted the reviewers to hear it as well as the students and the teachers, that these are not judges, these are conversation leaders. Their job is to really tell you what they thought was wonderful about your project, give you some growth feedback, and then also be discussants and getting other peers to talk to each other. This is really the agenda that we use over and over and over again, year after year. It's very similar every year. We have that welcome, we have the keynote, we then go into our poster sessions, and you can see we have 3 of those that last approximately, you see here it's over like 40 minutes each one. And we take the number of students that attend and we break them into 3 groups. The first group is presenting first. The second group is a peer review group, and we'll show you what they do in peer review. And the third group goes out and has some time to explore the zoo. And then they rotate. So they just know that that's the format. We come back and have lunch, and at lunch we have another keynote. This time it was a butterfly researcher from the University of Florida. We do a group photo. Then we have some time to explore the zoo. And sometimes we collect some GLOBE data depending on our numbers. But this year we just had a meeting yesterday with 700 students. We're going to try to do that over 3 days. We thought, why not? You have 700 data collectors. We should be collecting data. So we are going to work something out for that. And then the schools have to leave early, right, to get back to school so the kids can catch their buses. So they left along the way. Our peer review form looks like most peer review forms, so I won't spend too much time here. But what we ask students to do is, as they're listening to other people, other groups present, is to give some feedback. And we just tell them to do 2 of those. They're probably going to go from table to table and listen to presentations. And they're probably going to hear more than two presentations, but we ask them just to reflect on two, the first two that they go to. And then after that, they kind of are in the feel for it, so then they can have the conversation just based on being there. We also use the stickers system, based on these themes that Globe has indicated are of high importance. So what we do is we put sheets of paper down at each table in front of the posters as the kids are presenting, and we have sticker sheets that each student gets a page of stickers. And so as they're listening to the presentation, they have to think to themselves, well, what was really compelling about this presentation? Was it the use of Globe data and the analysis of that data? Was it the community impact? Was it the research process, etc.? Then they would just take that sticker and stick it on the sheet. And then those sheets go to the teachers and then back to the student group so that the students can get a feel for what others thought about their projects. So again, it's just another form of feedback. This has those forms and responses like I showed you, so you can get right there. Oh, no, wait, this one's for the, the expert reviewers. So instead of using the paper method, this actually came from the University of Toledo, and Sarah, who I knows on the call, this is really her sheet that she started with, and we just modified it. And so the reviewers can use their smartphones, or we bring in iPads and or tablets, and they can review right here. So instead of having to write it all down, they just basically write their email address, the project number that's on the table, not the table number, but the project number, and then the last name of the first student in the program, just to make sure we can match that all up in case something happens. And then they just go through the rubric and they can just say, which category or which level they think for each of these categories, and then submit. And then that turns into really nice digital responses that we can sort and then send to the teachers immediately. So this is how we're able to provide really fast, good feedback. And we tell the reviewers anything they write, students can see. So be kind and be helpful, give critical feedback that is actually forward thinking and helping the students for their next efforts. That was, again, I think a really nice way for us to stay organized. I wanted to talk about lunch, another keynote. We already talked about that. So I think that's really the bottom line for us, was that we just really grew from year to year. And as we grew, we knew that we needed to stay organized. So we created a system around that. And I think we've kind of got a well-oiled machine at this point. It seems like the symposium almost runs itself with proper planning, but we just are using that same kind of template year after year, and it seems to be working well for us. I'll stop talking so Janene has time, and then we'll open it up for, I think, questions after that.
Okay, hello, I'm Janene. I am currently a middle school teacher who hosts every year a science fair. It's definitely not a symposium, and that is because my school requires me to do the science fair with the intentions of taking kids to a local district fair and then possibly the state science fair. So, um, the first couple of years I did a science fair, I did it solely like a science symposium, and it was 100% all Globe projects, and I really miss doing it that way, but this is the requirement of my school. So I'm going to really fly through it with and just share like a couple things that I thought teachers might find interesting. Definitely want to skip through some of them, a bunch of them. But I wanted to give everybody a chance to like scan that QR code if you want to view the rest of it later. Okay, I'm gonna skip all of this, but if you're interested in the story and how I got to the point where I am now, you're welcome to look through this. It kind of explains how it was like definitely a trial by error, like every single school year. I tried lots of different things and ended up where I am today. Um, Okay, let's see. So I have a bunch of information on here that's kind of like to encourage teachers. You can do it. It works with your standards, all sorts of stuff. Here's a timeline of how I did it if you're worried about time or prep. And this timeline has a bunch of links to things also that I used along the way. So there's lots of resources here. Um, this is a super cool resource that I use every single year. to get kids excited about the science fair, and it never gets old. I keep waiting for kids to go, this movie is lame, and every year they get so excited. So I just show them this Disney documentary about the ISIF science fair, and they get extremely invested in the characters or the kids that are in it. And to the point that it takes us like 2 days to watch it, and they'll come back to class the second day and tell me that they like literally did a Google search on these kids and found out like more about their projects and what they're doing now and what colleges they're going to. And they always get really excited about this documentary. I don't know if everyone has seen it or not, but it is a very cute documentary about participating in a science fair. Okay. Here's another resource that I actually learned from my experiences with Globe, and that is that to begin the science fair, I always have the kids walk around and look at science fair poster boards from the previous year so they can just get introduced to it and see what other kids' projects look like. And they every year get really excited when they see kids' names on the poster boards that they know, like that are their older siblings or kids that they know that are now in high school. And so they always really enjoy this activity. And I have them just use Post-its, and they just put a couple comments or something on the poster boards, and then I'll pick a couple of them to spur some class discussion. So this is one really good, like key technique that I use every year at the beginning of our science fair projects. I rely a lot on technology, a lot. And one of the things that I use a lot is Padlet. For several really key important things that I do for the science fair, I use Padlet, and this is one of them. For us to form testable questions, I have the kids just spew any kind of questions out, and we put them in a Padlet so that way we can then organize them and move questions around that are testable, or other kids can like hit the like button or add comments underneath them. So I love using Padlet for like the questioning step, and so I thought I would share that here so that everybody can see how I use that resource. And then I also use Padlet when my kids are doing their background research, because my students are really terrible at finding actual credible sources. And so I make a Padlet that has all of their names on it. And then I make them put their sources on this Padlet so that I have access to all of their sources in one place, so that I can go and view them and leave them information. I just tell them, if your project gets a heart from me, it means it's good to go and you can use it in your project. So this is the easiest way for me to go and view all their sources beforehand. That way it doesn't take me an overwhelming time towards the end of the projects when I'm grading things. So, and this way I catch things really quick, like if a link doesn't take me to a website, or something's blocked, or it's a Wikipedia or something that I just don't want them using. I just seem to have more time at the beginning of the project to take care of that stuff, and that helps them get started. And I think one year I even used it and told like them that they had to leave comments on somebody else's. So they used it as a method to communicate with each other and ask questions or leave some feedback about topics. And then every student is required to create, I mean, I make it like a template for them, but they all create this Kanban that has all the steps of the scientific method, and then they have to move the steps. And this is how they keep track of what they're doing and what step is next in the process. And this is the first year I did not use this, because I have an alternative this year that I used that I'm going to show you. Another method in the past that I've used, in case teachers are familiar with this, is a Trello. So you really can use it for anything. It's not just for science, but it works really well for putting like your class standards or your unit curriculum. But I have in the past used it for storing resources for my science symposium. So I just thought I'd share it in case somebody was looking for some kind of method to organize stuff. Then I do something a little similar to Jodi in that I use spreadsheets for a lot of the steps. And one of them is to organize the kids' projects, the categories, their research questions. I also use this to keep track of like, are there going to be students that require to borrow materials from me? Or do they need me to reach out to an expert or something like that? And then when we participate in other stuff, having this already taken care of, usually I can just send this. Like last year we went on a field trip because of one of the judges that came to the science fair, invited us on a field trip. And I was able to just send her this, and it already had my kids' names and everything on it, and it was really nice that it was already organized. Okay, I have to spend a lot of time differentiating my projects, and so I don't know if anybody's familiar with this, but for some of my classes, I use Science Buddies. It's a website that has pretty much already created science fair projects, and I use it for the classes that really need a lot of help and guidance, and they don't have help at home, and so they need a lot of help with all the steps. And this is their first time doing a science fair project. And then some of my classes do globe projects, and then usually I have a class or two that does a whole group project. We all do the same project together because they're either low learners or they're young or they're this is their first time doing a science fair. I just kind of play it by ear every year and how the kids are grouped in my classes, and I try to figure out which to do. So every year it's a little bit different, but these are things that I've used in the past to help me differentiate. I actually do have to assess my kids throughout the science fair, even though I wish that this was more set up like a symposium. And so the way that I do that is I give them a very small grade on each tiny part. So they get a grade for coming up with a research question and a hypothesis. I do not give a grade that's like for 200 points on the huge whole science fair. I do not have an assignment like that. That's a big giant grade. Last year was the first year that kids complained that I didn't do this. They wanted to know what they got on the science fair. And so, because of that, I came up with a tool that I used this year that went really well. So I have that to share with you. I have some information here about how I purchase things or how I like request donations and things. So you can look through that if you're interested in that. There's some information here about like where I get my judges from and how I like work out the whole day. In the past, we've always done it every single class period, and this year my school has required me to only use the afternoon. So I had to put all the kids into 3 sessions in the afternoon. So I'm not sure how it's going to go, but we'll see. And then I always at the science fair try to have some kind of display set up for the kids to look at some other things. And last year, Sarah's brother brought his shark fossil display. And I think he's coming back again this year. And then we also have someone who's bringing his collection of Ohio flint. I have a rockhound friend that is bringing a big rock display. So I'm really excited about the kids having those two people at the fair that are like experts in their field, and we'll have things there that the kids can touch and look at and new to them. So this year, because of the questions I got last year, I created this board game. Last year I had this theme in my class and I tried to connect as much things as I could to playing board games. And so that's where this idea came from. So, although I only give small grades for all these parts of the science fair, I made the kids this board game last year so that they, if they wanted to, could keep track of their points for all the parts that they earned. And then also, it's like the checklist. So, instead of using the Kanban this year, we used this to check off all the parts, and they kind of just like moved along the board game to get to the finish line. And then, there was one other thing I want to share. Oh, yes. This year was the first year that instead of having the kids write in like spiral bound notebooks, I had them write on loose leaf paper, and I kept a file folder system that we called our journals this year. And so I used big bins, and there's a bunch of I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt myself. There's a bunch of pictures on here when you look at the presentation later, if you want to look at them, of the kids participating and the actual science fair and how it's like all the displays and everything. But I had this problem in the past where the kids would lose these notebooks that they had put data in, observations, their resources, and like tears occurred. So this was the first year that I bought these bins from Walmart, got the hanging files and got the manila file folders and let them decorate them. And then everything that we did after we did it, I just told them, go find your folder and put it in there. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we won't lose stuff. So that's it. That's everything I have to share.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Janene.
Yeah.
So tons of resources from both Jodi and Janene. I just want to actually give Haley some time to make sure that we cover the resources that we have for you. It should only be a few minutes.
I'm going to be super brief, and we've already gotten so many resources, and Jodi and Janene really got into like the nitty-gritty of organizing, which is super helpful. The resource I'm going to share is a little bit more broad stroke, but it has a lot of the links and templates that we use when we've hosted our student research symposia. Um, so I'll skip through a lot of this, but this is a PDF and Alicia just put it in the chat so you can have access to that and all of the links. So it starts out with just an overview, which Jen already went over. What are the Student Research Symposia? How is it different than a science fair? And Jen talked about this as well, and Jodi a little bit too, that really we're modeling these events on professional science conferences. And we have evaluated our events. We have an external evaluator who's done evaluation on all of our events we've held since 2016. And so a lot of what's coming out of this quick start guide comes from our evaluation. And the evaluation has been super exciting, that they really show that there's a huge positive outcome for students participating in these events, both in their science self-efficacy, which is like their belief they can do science, and their value of science. So Jen mentioned these key components of the SRS, getting to talk to STEM professionals and discussing their research, getting to participate in peer review, talk to each other, learning about science careers, and participating in these hands-on activities. And so in the guide, we go through each of these four main components, give a few tips, and then offer our resources. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like, but I want to be brief, so I won't go through each thing, but we have some tips here. Some in the purple are really specific tips. In the gray, we have some information that may have come from our evaluation work. And then we have some more specifics and links to our resources. So we have a flyer that we use to help orient our STEM professionals to the event and provide some context for them. We have our feedback forms, which are similar to what Jodi showed, and some project review information here that you can click on. And so similarly for peer review is new often for a lot of the students that come to these events. And so some supports for students as they're doing this is really helpful. We're actually linking again to Jodi's stickers, which we love. They're such a great resource, and also our review forms, and we have sort of a slideshow that helps walk students through what that peer review process is. Science careers, talking about showcasing science-related jobs can really make a difference. And so we have some suggestions here. And I saw our Globe partner, Tracy Ostrom, is on the call, and she wrote up a scientist panel that she's done at events she's hosted, SRS she's hosted, that have been really successful in kind of showcasing all different science careers from the reviewers. And then lastly, no one's surprised that students would rather be up moving about interacting and not sitting and listening. But we have some links to some kind of cool activities that have been used at these events in the past as well. We have a sample agenda. I know Jodi and Janene both also shared those kind of resources, so something to build off of. And then some templates. So we have a flyer template that you can actually make a copy of and edit for your event to share out information, and then also a media advisory template if you want to invite local media to your event. It's another one of those, kind of fill in your information, and you can use the template to do that. And then lastly, we have links to, if you really want to deep dive, all of our evaluations, and also some SRS impact films, which I would highly recommend. They're very short, like 5 minutes short, but they show the huge impact that these events have had on students. They're really beautiful. So that resource is available for you. And then before I end, I know Jodi mentioned an organization, Lacey's, and this organization has supported a lot of local student research symposia, and Alicia just put the link in the chat. But their grant cycle is opening on February 1st. So they support instruments and supplies for educators, but they also actually support these local student research symposia. So that's a great resource if you're looking for funding for your event. And I'm going to stop there so we have time to discuss.
All right, awesome. So I'm going to go back to some of the questions. So again, thank you to Jodi and Janene and Haley for these great resources. Um, and I think that I know one of the comments was, my school wants me to do a science fair, and I saw one of those in the chat too. And it is very true. The many states, especially, have science fairs, right? And there are science fairs that have been going for a very long time, and they have these great students and the projects and the competition and just everything that's built around that. Um, and I just to emphasize again that I think that these also have their place. And that's what our evaluation shows. And so those evaluation links at the end, you know, if at some point the science fair is not in what you want to do, we do have that research for you in the back with those evaluations to say that this is just as important as maybe those science fairs are, and that they can be really impactful for students. Okay, so that's my little 2-second justification for yay science symposia. The question we had here was, how much prep did you do with the professional reviewers prior to the event? So we do have about 8 minutes officially. So I want to just keep in mind that for people that need to leave at the top of the hour. So Jodi, do you want to let us know how much prep you did with your professional reviewers?
Yes, yeah, we held Zoom meetings. So, and now the reviewers are almost always the same. I shouldn't say that. We get new people every year, but the bulk of the people are the same people year after year. But at the very beginning, we just did Zoom calls and what had like a half hour, 30-minute Zoom call, showed them the agenda, told them where to park, told them, all the nuts and bolts types of things, and then just spent a little time on the review form and really what we were after about the conversation versus giving numbers or grades. So and I think that helped a lot. um,
Awesome. Thank you. For us, we did do a video. We did a webinar for our STEM professionals, and then we recorded it so they could access it later. We do have the flyer, and they do get access to things ahead of time. Whether they review it or not, so I know that when we've done regional ones, we've always had a little meeting beforehand, again, emphasizing that conversation piece. Do you?
Janet, if I
Oh, yeah.
could, I just also like to add to that is, and I think us, the last time we did this, us saying it out loud in front of everyone the day of the event was really a nice reminder to the expert reviewers and also to the students about what this really looked like. And I think that that was helpful because if there's somebody who we sent this information to, but they didn't read it or they didn't watch the video or whatever, at least they heard it out loud. And we really made a big thing of that at that introduction before we did the poster presentations.
Yes, good point. Frequent reminders.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and I mean, we've gotten feedback too from STEM professionals, right? So they've done science fairs and they've done student research symposia, right? And so I just remember in the very beginning, they're like, I don't know how to do this because I'm usually a science fair judge. This is very different. You're asking me to do something very different. So it is a learning curve for them as well. And so having that reminder, I think, is helpful. Do you give the peer review feedback to the groups? That was a question.
We do. It's getting trickier with these bigger numbers, but at the very beginning when we had two schools, it was super easy. And that peer review form has a project number on it. So we actually cut them all apart and then put them into groups so that all the ones that went to one teacher, she got a stack or he got a stack of them. And that worked out fine. Now that we have such high numbers, I don't even remember if we did that last year, Sarah, or not, but it's trickier now with our big numbers, to be honest.
Just a quick highlight too. One of the things we didn't talk a lot about is how important the career panel has become. Tracy, I saw Tracy do that. I think Tracy, you had that for the first time that I remember years and years ago. And it was so interesting. And I know, David Paget, you brought this up as well, that it has been really interesting having that time to talk to students and how many students comment on, this is what I thought a scientist looked like. But now I know that they're like normal and they want to talk to me and they're nice. And like, I can actually do this, right? And just hearing from the panelists as they're talking about how they became a scientist and what struggles they've been through is super important to kids feeling like they can enter that scientific workforce, right? Hearing that the scientists or STEM professionals that they met struggled at some point, we see that in our evaluations that is like huge for these students.
And having it at the end, Jen, when they've already kind of know their faces and they've seen them walking around and some of them had some in-depth conversations, it facilitated more of a dialogue and discussion as opposed to here's what I do as a scientist, kind of stuff. So that at the end, kind of end cap was great.
Yeah, I was going to add, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record. And it just occurred to me, when you say I sound like a broken record, does anybody under 30 even know what that means?
I do.
But yeah, like I always say, I've found a lot of success working with informal education programs, institutions, after school programs, because they don't have a lot of the constraints that the formal education system has. And secondly, I'm not saying this just because I'm on YLACE's board, but I really like the fact that YLACE is very flexible in who they grant to. It could just be an individual educator. They don't have to be at a school. They don't have to be if it's an individual educator that just has a really good idea for maybe 5 or 6 kids in the after school program, they're eligible for grants, and that's very uncommon.
So
I wonder if I can ask a question. I know we're over, but I have the opposite problem of Jodi in that she's got like 700 students. I have 7 middle school students and possibly like 5 high school students. It's going to be the first year. And I just wondered if there were any tips for like the first time local SRS that's on this smaller scale.
The year that I had that few students was one of the best years I ever had a science symposium. I had a very few kids, and Sarah brought several people from the University of Toledo to look at their projects, and it was really great because it wasn't overwhelming, it wasn't too loud, there was plenty of time to see everyone's projects. I did use the GLOBE badges that year. I do remember that like each kid got multiple badges for the things that their project contributed to, whether it was community or the scientific method. And then I think we like paused for lunch and snacks.
Yeah.
And there were so few of us that it was like the judges could just sit down with the kids and ask questions and chat.
And you have more time for peer review too.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. You might even give them some questions like that they can pull from, because sometimes at peer review, they're not good at asking each other questions at the beginning. They get better at it. But so you might even say, you have some questions that they could, just a sheet that they could pull from, so that you really give them enough time to really talk to each other.
Would you encourage me to have the kids work individually or work? I think they want to work in pairs and groups of 3. And I think when they're collecting data, particularly, I think that's helpful for them. So in the end, it feels like it's only going to be like 5 or 6 projects.
That's great. Yeah, no, I would definitely say pairs is better than singly in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
For all the reasons you might suspect. If let's say Sarah and I are partners and when we work together on a project, when it's time to present, it could be that Sarah stands by the poster while I'm being a peer reviewer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she presents the whole poster, and then
and switch,
and then we switch, and then I have to present the whole poster. And I like that a lot when they're working in groups, so that they don't just have one little piece that they talk about, that they have to talk about the whole picture. I think that's really helpful.
In 2016, when we had our first one, I think we were like 5 days from like the closing of registration, and we had 6 kids registered, and one of them was my daughter. So it was a little dicey. It has been a delight, everyone. It has been a pleasure to see all of you. Thank you so much for everyone for coming out tonight, and I hope you have a great night.